Uh, Generally in the purnima, the residents of Braj, they come out and do parikrama in Govardhan, and so especially on this particular day. Now, Prabhupada said certain things about it. Actually, let me chant. Well, actually, let's talk about it first. So, we're going to Timothy Shah. Gananjana Shlaka Jakshuru Viditam Yeda Tasmai Shiva Maha. So, Prabhupada said that we don't, in one sense, we don't commemorate Guru Purnima in the same way the Mayavadis do. How do the Mayavadis commemorate Guru Purnima? They commemorate it by being the day that they worship their spiritual master. Now, there's nothing wrong with worshiping the spiritual master. Don't get me wrong. But Prabhupada said two things about it. He said, actually, the proper procedure, because there was one devotee who actually did a whole Vyasa Push for Prabhupada on Guru Purnima. Prabhupada said the proper procedure is not to do that because the proper procedure is more personal. The personal procedure is on the spiritual master's appearance day. Then you have the Vyasa Puja ceremony, not on one day for everybody. And Prabhupada commented that's a Mayavadi conception, which is interesting, that they actually have this Guru Purnima for everybody. I guess it would save a lot of money and time. Rather than have, especially in this time with all the different gurus, it would probably be easier just to get it all finished in one day, save the temple money. So anyway, but Prabhupada said that's Mayavadi conception, because we have an individual relationship with our specific spiritual master. Now the residents in Raj, they don't celebrate it in a Mayavadi fashion. What their conception is, and this is what primarily we're going to talk about today, after we chant the prayers of the departed Vaishnavas, their conception is that it's the disappearance day of Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami is like the guru for all the residents of Braj. And he spent quite a bit of time at Govardhan, especially in this one place, which is right opposite the temple of Lord Shiva called Chakaleshwara Mahadev. Anyone's been there? Some of you have been there. Some of you have been there with me. Chakaleshwara Mahadev is a temple to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva is the Dikpala of this whole area in Govardhan, especially the Manasi Ganga area. He's the Dikpala, or protector. And it's called Chakaleshwara because the Shuddhashan chakra of Krishna circumambulated, or rotated to be more precise, rotated above this particular area to protect Govardhan Hill from the torrents of rain that Indra was sending down. So right opposite that is the Bhajan Kutir of Sanatana Goswami, and there's such an interesting story about that Bhajan Kutir. That Sanatana Goswami wanted to write some Vaishnava literatures there, as he did later on. And he was bothered by mosquitoes. And so what happened is that Lord Shiva said, please don't leave here. I will take care of the mosquitoes. So to this day, at least I do not experience mosquitoes there. To this day, that area is protected from mosquitoes by Lord Shiva's mercy. So that's why Sanatana Goswami is considered like guru for the residents of Raj. And actually, he's the oldest of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. In one sense, he was the Siksha Guru of Srila Rupa Goswami, who we are followers of, because we are called Rupanugas. And also you could say, well, Lokanath and Bhugarva Goswamis were older. They were actually sent by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Braj to prepare the ground for Rupa and Sanatana to come later on. But in another sense, Sanatana Goswami, of the six Goswamis, was the oldest personality, considered the guru of everyone. So today we are commemorating the disappearance day of Sanatana Goswami, which is a very important day on the Vaishnava calendar. That's why I decided to speak about that today. So before that, we're going to chant the prayers to the departed Vaishnavas, known as a portion of Gaura Viraha, also known as Jay Anilo Prema Dana. Some of you may have heard this before. So if you know the song, you could follow along and respond. Or you could hand out the song books if you have. It's a pretty easy song. I mean, most of the devotees know it. They can chant responsibly. Jai Hamanilo Prema Jana Kona Pracho Jaya Sanatana Goswami, Jaya Sanatana Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jaya 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 Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paramahansa also Tella such a Shimad His divine grace. Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Iskan founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Vilas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends, say go Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri without harm Sri Gaur Bhakta Friend Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Snayam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Ki Jai Mathura Ki Jai Jagadasami Ki Jai Manmai Ki Jai Srimati Vilasi Devi Ki Jai Samaved Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai Gaur Premananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda. Namo Vishnu Krishna Prasaya Gurave. Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gauravani Vichari Nivishesha Shandavani plus education. So let me read the translation to this poem by Narottam Das Thakur. He who brought the treasure of divine love and was filled with compassion and mercy. Where is such a personality as Srinivas Acharya? Where am I, Swarup Damodar Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das? The savior of the fallen. Where am I, Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta, and where is Krishna's Kavi Raj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into the fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities, being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes? Narottam Das simply weeps. So, we're going to talk about Sanatana Goswami this morning. So, we're going to Vedanta Shah, Galanjana, Shakya, Chaksur, Vidikam, Yena, Tasmai, Shri Gurave Namaha. So, a little history here. He appeared in the year 1488, and he was in a family of Brahmanas. Actually, Brahman dynasty was coming from South India, not from Bengal, even though he was born in Bengal. He's the Saraswata Brahmin dynasty. So it's a very, very high, considered a very, very high dynasty in India, or what's called Gotra. Sometimes you go to temples in India and they'll ask you, what is your Gotra? And so devotees were instructed by Prabhupada to say, we are members of the Achyuta Gotra. It's very interesting. Because still in Orissa, I wasn't allowed in some of the temples. There's an interesting story. I think Gopinath was with us at that time, wherever he is now. He's not with us now, so he's on his mobile phone. So,
Some visitor wanted to ask if the temple is open. So
temple is open. We tell them the temple's open. So, yeah, so anyway, so we went to one temple in what's it, Shakshi Gopal temple. And I was with some Brahmins from India, and they all introduced themselves as Brahmins from India. They said, I'm a Brahmin. One said, I'm a Brahmin from Gujarat, I'm a Brahmin from Madhya Pradesh. And I said, I'm a Brahmin from New York. They still didn't let me in. Anyway, it doesn't work. So, anyway, so there are three famous brothers. There was Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and Anupama. Previously, they were called Amar, Santosh, and Ballava. And they were all pure devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the childhood of the pure devotees is actually very similar. Like you see in Prabhupada's childhood, Prabhupada was playing with Radha Krishna deities when he was young. And the rest of us in the West, we were playing with God knows what when we were young. Gopinath was playing with a guitar when he was young. But so they were actually enacting. This is very similar to Lord Nityananda's childhood work. Lord Nityananda was enacting the various pastimes of Krishna. So they were also enacting the various pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, and they constructed replicas of Braj. Like there's a Radha Kund and a Shaima Kund, and they were very much absorbed in Krishna's pastimes from the very beginning of life. And Rupa and Sanatana and Anupama. And they were actually instructed in philosophy by another very educated personality known as Vijayavachaspati, who is the brother of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. We all know about Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and his interactions with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Jagannath Puri. So this is such an interesting story that when Sanatana was very young, he had a dream that a young Brahmin boy came to him and gave him a Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, in those days, books were not so commonly obtained. Why is that? Because there was no printing press. So the books actually had to be hand copied by a scribe. And that was quite an arduous process to hand copy a book. So he had this dream, and then he woke up and he didn't have the Bhagavatam, and he was completely depressed. Just a young boy. Later on, Krishna came disguised as a Brahmin and brought him a Bhagavatam and said to him, if you always study this book, you will attain perfection. Very, very interesting story. So the Bhagavatam became Sanatana Goswami's very life and soul. And he glorifies, I'm going to read a little bit from his literature, Krishna Lila Stava. And this should inspire us as far as our relationship with the Bhagavatam. He says, "O holy Bhagavad, you are my only company, my only friend, and my guru." This is nice, intense. You are my greatest treasure and my personal savior. You are the emblem of my highest fortune and the very form of ecstasy. I offer my obeisances unto you. So later on, of course, then he started studying the Bhagavatam and became a great scholar in Bhagavatam, and also Rupa Goswami and Anupama. So later on, some of their family members that were working for the Nawab Hussain Shah, who's like the governor of that province in Bengal, their family members passed away. And so they were inducted into the service of the Muslim government. Now, someone may question, why were these great devotees serving this government? Because the Muslim government was not exactly the kindest government. It's not like in Finland, everything is wonderful. It's the number one happy place in the whole world. Hopefully you're all happy and understand that. But actually in India, it wasn't like that at that time. Because it's not that I'm anti any particular religion, but the Muslims who had taken over India were called the Mughals. They weren't the educated Muslims. They were actually educated, just a little European history, not European, Middle Eastern history for you. That originally the Mughals were not there in the Muslim religion. Originally, especially in Baghdad, the Muslim religion was actually quite liberal. And then they used to study all the religious literatures in the world, all the different religions in the world. They would all work together. It was a very educated society. And then these Mughals came from the north, the tribes from the north. These were, I don't know if anyone's heard of Genghis Khan. They were like his type of people. And it's described in the history there that they would travel on horseback and they wouldn't take time to sleep or eat or even go to the bathroom. They would do everything on the horse. It's a little history. I thought it was interesting just to understand the Mughal people. And you could smell them coming like 20 kilometers away. And these were the types of people who actually changed the whole face of the Muslim religion. Because it was actually based, for many people outside of Saudi Arabia, it was actually based upon very educated culture. And later on it became, not every Muslim, but later on many aspects, especially in Spain, that happened to us, the Mughals who went into Spain. Later on it changed things. So you may ask, why did Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami assume posts in the Muslim government? And the reason is that they and their family were threatened that unless you take over this position, and their family relatives had these positions previously, unless you take over this position or these positions as revenue officer, vice chair, whatever it is, then we're going to kill everybody. We're going to kill all the Hindus. And the Muslims were renowned for killing Hindus or devotees. It's described about one particular Mughal. His name was Aurangzeb. Some of you may have heard about him. He's considered an incarnation of Kamsa. And some people say that he used to not take breakfast until as many Brahmins who had Brahmin threads and their weight would equal his weight would be killed that day. So, people talk about Holocaust. Certainly in Europe you had the Holocaust. But the Mughals killed more than 85 million Hindus over a period of time in India. 85 million. And I think that far surpasses any atrocity that's ever occurred anywhere else in the world. So, okay, so they started working for the Mughal government. And in the meantime, they acquired a lot of wealth. And they built 3 mansions in Upama, Sanatana and Rupa Goswami. They built 3 mansions in this place called Ramakeli, which is where they lived. So eventually, they heard about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in order to see them and enlist them in his service, he was going through Ramakeli on his way to Vrindavan. And so they immediately, when they saw him, they fell down on the ground and put straws in their teeth as a sign of humility. That's a tradition in India, that you put Jai, Shrishi, Gornatai, Jai. You put a straw in your teeth and you offer dhanavats to a great personality. And so they took association with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu there and got initiated. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to the 3, "You are my eternal servants." And he gave them the name Rupa and Sanatan. Previously, they had gotten some Muslim names, David Khas and Shakara Malik. And so he initiated them at that particular point, very quick initiation. And they were able to give advice to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What is the advice they gave to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Because Lord Chaitanya was going to Vrindavan, accompanied by this large group of people. It was like hundreds of people going with him. And then they said, this is not appropriate. They said to Lord Chaitanya, when you go to Vrindavan, it should be in a meditative mood. And so later on, Lord Chaitanya decided not to go to Vrindavan at that particular juncture. When he went back, he just went with one or two servants, the Bhadra Bhattacharya and another servant who carried something for him. So this is really important for us to understand the mood of Vrindavan. It's a very meditative mood. Vrindavan is the most sacred place. So anyway, so later on, the brothers became interested in leaving everything, leaving government service, and joining Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so Rupa Goswami was able to easily resign from government service. And what he did is he left his money, he divided his money up in a certain way, and left a quarter of his money with a grocer who was the banker at that particular point for emergencies. And he understood that his brother would need that money in order to escape later on. But Sanatana Goswami was not able to escape so easily. So what he did is that he claimed that he was sick and he didn't show up for work. But while being sick, he had Brahmins come to his house, his mansion, and heard the Bhagavatam every day. So one day, the Nawab Hussain Shah, along with his physician, came to see Sanatana Goswami. He saw Sanatana Goswami was not sick. And he said, Sanatana, or Shakaramala, which is his name at that time, don't do this. You should come back to work. And I need you at work because I am going to conquer Orissa. So he said to the Nawab, you're giving pain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, you don't want to say that to a fanatic person like Nawab. And so he refused to serve as the Nawab, and so the Nawab put him in prison. Okay, so he puts him in prison, and Sanatana's there in prison trying to figure out how to escape. So basically, he goes to the jailer, the person who's in charge of the prison, and he says, how much would you want to help me escape? Like I mentioned last night, that's India. And so basically, he took some of the money that his brother had left, and he bribed the jailer. And the jailer was getting nervous. The jailer was thinking, what is going to be my fate? I'm going to get in trouble because I let you go. He said, no. You just say Sanatana jumped into the river and drowned himself. So the jailer let him go, so he escaped, but he had to go through the pass, through the mountains to escape. And to cross over one particular range of mountains, he needed some help. So he arrived at a hotel. And he was traveling with one servant. His servant's name was Ishan. Actually, that's like a traditional name for servants in Bengal. Ishan. You hear it. Somebody like Lord Chaitanya's mother had a servant Ishan. So there seems to be some sort of tradition in that regard. So he was traveling with one servant and went to the hotel. And the hotel keeper had a servant or friend who was a great astrologer. And he could read palms and everything like that. So the astrologer said, looking at Sanatana Goswami, and I guess he looked at his palm or something like that. Obviously, Sanatana Goswami didn't give him his horoscope. So the astrologer said, these people have 8 gold coins with them. And so the hotel keeper, he thought, I'm going to kill them and take the 8 gold coins. So Sanatana Goswami was observing the whole thing and being an expert politician, understanding politics. He saw the hotel keeper was really nice to him. You know, there's this saying that Prabhupada would often quote from Chandra Pandit, that too much devotion is a sign of a thief. You understand? Like, so, like if you go in, I don't know if you have that here, but sometimes you go to buy a car from a car dealership. It's like they're your best friend. Oh, I remember going in once and this person said, "Oh, Swami, how are you doing? How's the Swami family?" I says, "No family." So he remembered me for like 30 years, just because, you know, I was a salesman. So Sanatana Goswami recognized that, and he thought, you know, something's happening. I must have something he wants. And he asked the servant, Ishan, do you have anything in your possession? Do you have any money, gold, stuff like that? And Ishan said, yes, I have 7 gold coins. He didn't reveal he had actually 8. And so Sanatana Goswami takes those 7 gold coins, goes to the hotel keeper, says to the hotel keeper, here, take this. Just help us cross over the mountains. And the hotel keeper said, thank God you're giving us that money, because if you hadn't given us that money, I would have killed you. You know, that's, I guess that's India for you. Not really, it's not that bad. There. So, but sometimes there's dacoits in different places. It's a fact, like when we were doing our South India tour, we were advised not to take a bus in certain areas because they would block the road. This is in certain places in Andhra Pradesh. The dacoits would block the road and rob you with the bus. And then at certain places in Bihar, isn't it? They stop trains.
Yes.
It's like old train robbery movies you may have seen. So some places in India, even though it's the East, it's like the Wild West. I'm trying to scare it. It's really interesting. I mean, one time I was in the train in Bengal, riding in the baggage car, and I was accosted by Naxalites. You know what Naxalites are? They're like fanatic communists who want to kill everybody who's not a communist. And they looked at me, the only Western guy there. Anyway, I was able to calm them down a little bit. So anyway, Sanatana Goswami escaped in that way, and eventually went to join the Lord in Benares, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was. And so by that time, as he crossed the hills and everything like that, he had looked like a Muslim mendicant. I mean, his clothes were torn, and he had a big beard. He just looked like a Muslim mendicant. So he arrived at the house of Chandrasekhar, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was staying, and he knocked on the door. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, there's a great devotee at the door coming to see me. And so Chandrasekhar goes to the door, and he opens the door and he says, oh, Muslim mendicant. Okay. Shuts the door. And then he goes back to the Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya says, was anyone there? And Chandrasekhar says, there's only Muslim mendicant. And Lord Chaitanya said, let him in. He's a great devotee. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced him. So one thing that Sanatana Goswami had that wasn't exactly torn was he had like a shawl that was given to him by his brother-in-law, Shrikant. You know, beautiful embroidered shawl, like a chadar. You know, this is not embroidered. But you understand, like some of the ladies wear these embroidered chadars. And so he had this on, and Lord Chaitanya, first of all, Lord Chaitanya said, you know, just clean yourself up. And secondly, after he'd been with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for some time, Lord Chaitanya kept looking at the shawl. You know, normally if someone keeps looking at something I have, I think they want it. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu understood that as a sannyasi, it wasn't appropriate for him to dress opulently like that. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave these instructions later on to Raghunath Goswami that now that you're in the renounced order of life, you have to observe certain restrictions. don't eat opulent food. Yes. And Prabhupada said, Mahaprasad is for the grahastas. I'm sure all of you are happy with that. When I first took sannyas, we got all the Mahaprasad. So anyway, it was actually a tradition in ISKCON that every time there was an offering, they would bring all the Mahaprasad up to the sannyasis. After a while, it wasn't so good for my health. So, but it's a fact. Don't wear fine clothing. Don't think of sensual activities with ladies, even in dreams. Don't speak for Java. All these things were given to Raghunath Goswami. They were very, very strict. Lord Chaitanya was very, very strict with his sannyasis. Of course, you're all aware of the Junior Haridas story. So, so what happened with Sanatana Goswami in this particular shawl is that Sanatana Goswami later on went to the banks of the Ganges and saw just someone there with a quilt. A quilt means, I know quilts, nowadays you pay a lot of money for a quilt, but actually originally a quilt meant that you had all this old cloth and you basically didn't want to throw it away and you couldn't afford to buy a new one. So you just pieced it together. That's where quilts came from. Nowadays it's fashion, isn't it? I mean, it's just like here in Finland, that it's fashion to have pants with holes in them. I had one disciple here, he had pants with holes, and I said, go buy yourself some new pants, and he did. And he came back and the pants also had holes in them. So I mean, there's different fashions. So anyway, so quilt meant like all these pieces of cloth that were put together because you couldn't afford to buy any sort of new cloth. So he went up to the other mendicant, and he said, please take my good shawl and give me your old quilt. The guy thought, he's joking with me, but Sanatana Goswami, he was able to exchange his shawl for the quilt. And he came back in front of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, where is your shawl? And he explained what had happened. And Lord Chaitanya, in a very interesting way, it's such an interesting quote from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that even if one spot of white leprosy remains, one should get rid of it. So for sannyasi is like a white sheet, and if there's one spot, then it really spoils everything. Like if you have a black sheet, or whatever, brown sheet, a spot doesn't really bother you. So Lord Chaitanya was very, very strict. So they spent many, many days, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed him in the Siddhanta of Krishna consciousness, and the Tattva, and the Bhav, and the Ras, and all those other different aspects of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And he instructed Sanatana Goswami to write literatures on Krishna consciousness. Later on, Sanatana Goswami was known as the Sambandha Acharya. There's three different aspects to realizing Krishna in this particular nomenclature. One is called Sambandha, the other one is called Abhideya, and the third type is called Prayojana. So Sambandha means to understand the connection and relationship between what we call the tattvas. Tattvas means Jiva Tattva, Vishnu Tattva, Shakti Tattva, and the different varieties of Shakti Tattvas and how they interact with each other. That's called Sambandha. Sambandha, which is very important because Bhaktivinoda Thakur states without Sambandha Jnana, or the knowledge of these different relationships, one will never progress in Krishna consciousness. Very, very important. And then Rupa Goswami is the Acharya of the Abhideya, which means the process of bhakti, beginning with sadhana bhakti, Vaidya bhakti, then Raganuga bhakti, Bhava bhakti, Prema bhakti, like that. So Rupa Goswami is the Acharya of that. And then you have Raghunath Goswami, who's the Acharya of Prayojana, or the ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness, pure love of God, or the different relationships in the spiritual world. Of course, all three of them talked about different things. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Sanatana Goswami to write like this and to go to Braj. So he did go to Braj and remained in Braj, but he also left Braj at a particular point to join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. And it's very interesting stories about his interactions with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, that Sanatana Goswami never entered the temple of Lord Jagannath, because having been employed by the Muslim government, he was considered to have lost his caste. They were very strict in those days. You can actually lose your caste just by having a Muslim throw water on you. In fact, it was considered if a Muslim threw water on you, you became a Muslim. I wish we had that process, Make everybody devotees, You're now a devotee. Oh no! I was in my life yet. Don't do that to me. But really, it was an interesting process. So Sanatana Goswami never entered the temple of Lord Jagannath. He resided with Haridas Thakur, as Rupa Goswami had. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he was respecting the etiquette there, he would force his way into the temple. Of course, he could have done that. Lord Chaitanya would have helped him, but he respected the ordinary etiquette, which is really important. In the Bhagavatam, it says that a devotee never violates etiquette. One who violates etiquette is called Maryada. Maryada means like violating the etiquette. So anyway, so he observed that, and there's this interesting story when he was in Puri with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because when he arrived there with all these sores on his body, which is something like eczema. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like you got this pus and everything that's coming out all over the body. It's really not so nice. And so even though he had all these sores on his body, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would regularly embrace him. And can you imagine that? Embracing someone who just these smelly sores all over his body. And so he got really upset. I'm offending, I can't see Lord Jagannath, I'm offending the devotees, and now I'm offending Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I should basically commit suicide. He was thinking, how am I going to commit suicide? Well, I'm going to jump under the cart of Lord Jagannath. And he didn't tell anybody, but Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu understood what he was thinking. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, if I thought I could achieve Krishna by committing suicide, I'm prepared to give up this body many, many times, millions of times. So he said, well, Lord Chaitanya's understood. So then he went to Jagadananda Pandit and he asked for advice. He said, my dear Jagadananda Pandit, what should I do? I'm committing offenses. I want to leave here. I got to get away. And Jagadananda Pandit said, just go to Vrindavan. The Lord said you should go to Vrindavan. So go to Vrindavan, right away, right after the Rath Yatra festival. And when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this, he got angry at Jagadananda Pandit. He said, this Jaga. And Jagadananda Pandit, if you don't know his ontological position or his spiritual position, he was Satyabhama in Lord Chaitanya and Krishna's pastimes. Life of Krishna. And so he said, Jaga. He's just a new devotee. He doesn't know anything. You're fit. He said to Sanatana Goswami, you're fit to be my guru. Wow. That's Lord Chaitanya said that to him. And so Sanatana Goswami was really upset still about the whole thing. He said, I got to get out of here. Then one day, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called for Sanatana Goswami. It's the middle of the summer. He called for Sanatana Goswami, and Lord Chaitanya was on the opposite side of the temple of Lord Jagannath. And he said, I want to see Sanatana Goswami. So Sanatana Goswami came to him through a very long path on the beach. Now, if you've ever walked on the beach in India in the middle of the summer, you don't. That's where hot sands came from. Because India, I've been in Braj when it's been 50 degrees there in the middle of the summer. You don't go out in the middle of the day. Not at all. You open the door at 8 o'clock in the morning, and like this hot air rushes at you and say, oh my God, I'm not going. You go out at night. So Sanatana Goswami, though, goes through the sand. He walks on the sand, burns his feet, comes to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraces him and says, which way did you come? And he said, I came by the beach. And Lord Chaitanya said, you should have come by the temple. The entrance to the temple. But Sanatana Goswami thinking, these sores are good. Anyone who sees me or comes near me or touches me, it's going to get contaminated, especially the pujaris. So that's why he took the long way around. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very pleased with him at that point. And also he revealed, he said, look, Sanatana, if I became disgusted by embracing you, I would not be a bona fide sannyasi. Because a sannyasi is supposed to be samadarshi. Vijuvini Santame, Brahmaniga Vihasani, Shuddhi Chatasvapakacha, Pandita Samadarshana, which means he has to see things equally. Sannyasi distinguishes between things that smell good and smell bad, then that's a disqualification because he's into Sanskrit. Don't worry, none of you have to follow that. I do. So anyway, it's difficult. Quite difficult. So anyway, so he says that. And then also, he said to Sanatana Goswami, Sanatana Goswami said, that's just external. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, actually, the real reason is that you and your brother are like my children. And so, like if you have a child, your mother's work or something, then you embrace the child, and the child may have so many interesting things that come out of their bodies. When they're really young. Then it's just like love. There's no question like, ooh, get away from me, you moochie thing. Very, very little good mothers would say that to their child, right? And in the early days of the movement, many children got traumatized because the ladies, I've been being worse, get away from me, moochie, moochie, moochie. And that's very traumatic for a child, isn't it? To be told by his mother, you're an outcast. You're moochie. So don't do that. Prabhupada said if someone's going to have children, they should do baby worship, not deity worship. So, anyway, so Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you and your brothers, you're all like my children. So Lord Chaitanya showed his affection for Sanatana Goswami in that way. It's amazing, isn't it? So it wasn't simply based on the fact that someone's equal, the sannyasi is equal, but he was so loving with his devotees. This is actually an interesting and important lesson for us, that we should be very loving with the other Vaishnavas. It's so easy to reject someone, not only because of some physical deformity, but because of, something that they're not cooperating with us or whatever. It's so easy to reject people. The Prabhupada said, it takes gallons of blood to make a devotee. So we should be very loving with the other Vaishnavas, very encouraging. And as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, I am finding fault with others because I myself am pockmarked with the same fault. So generally we find fault because we can identify it because we know about our own faults. Isn't it? That's why we find fault. So, anyway, so later on, Sanatana Goswami went back to Braj, and he, along with Rupa Goswami, because Anupam had previously passed away. Anupam was a devotee of Lord Ramchandra. So along with Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami followed Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions to uncover the sites of Lord Krishna's pastimes, to install deities and arrange for their worship, to compile bhakti scriptures, and to propagate the rules of devotional service. So Sanatana Goswami's main place of residence was in this place called the Dwadasadicha Hill. Dwadasadicha means 12 sons. The reason it's called 12 sons is that when Krishna jumped into the Jamuna River to chastise the Kaliya serpent, and he came out after chastising the Kaliya serpent, he was shivering. And so he went on top of this hill, and the sun shone forth with 12 times the normal brilliance to dry off Sri Krishna. So Sanatana Goswami resided there, and here's the story of Madan Mohan, which is quite an interesting story. Originally, when Advaitacharya came, there's a little side story. When Advaitacharya came to Vrindavan, this was years and years before Sanatana Goswami, the other Goswamis came. Advaitacharya found the deity of Madan Gopal, who later on became known as Madan Mohan. And when he left there, he left the deity in the care of a family, a Brahmin family, a Cholde Brahmin family in Mathura. So this deity was being taken care of by that family. And eventually, this family had a son, and the son and the family were taking care of the deity like their child. So the deity would sit at the dinner table, the son would play marbles with the deity, and son would take the deity to bed at night with him. Oh my God, don't do that. So, it's quite a spontaneous method of worship. So later on, Sanatana Goswami, he actually came to visit this family because he was doing madhukari. Madhukari means when a sannyasi or a renunciate goes around and he collects a little bit from each house, and usually grains. Jai Shri Shri Gordhatai. So I'll try to finish quickly. Usually he collects grains or other things from the house. And so he was going around, so he went to this house and he saw them worshiping the deity like this, or not worshiping the deity. And so he instructed the lady of the house and said, come on, put the deity on the altar and do all this deity worship. And so she did that. And well, fast forward, or I guess, part of the story is that previously Sanatana Goswami had this encounter with a boy in around Vrindavan. He saw some cowherd boys, and the cowherd boy, one particular cowherd boy, came to see Sanatana Goswami, and he said, Sanatana Goswami, I want to go with you. And they generally the little children are called Lala. Why do you want to go with me? He said, I want to, this is just a quote from the literature, I want to go with you if you, and Sanatana Goswami said, if you stay with me, what will you eat? And the boy said, Baba, whatever you eat. And he said, I only eat dry chapatis and chickpeas. And then the boy says, that is what I will eat. And the Sanatana Goswami says, no, that won't be enough for you. You should stay with your mother and father. And the boy said, no, Baba, I want to stay with you. So he explained this to the boy and sent the boy home. So that boy, of course, was Krishna. And that boy was actually Madan Gopal, later became known as Madan Mohan. So anyway, so Sanatana Goswami, he instructed the family, go back to the story like that. So they were worshiping the deity in a more opulent way, putting the deity on the altar. And then Sanatana Goswami had a dream. And in that dream, the deity appeared to him and said, you've spoiled all my fun. Now I just have to stay on this stupid altar all day long. And I can't, I was playing with the kids, I'm like, boy, what have you done to me? So therefore you have to take care of me. And Sanatana Goswami said, no, you just stay where you are. in the dream. So, but that night also the family, the gentleman, his name was Damodar, that's right, his name was Damodar. He had a dream and he was instructed in that dream to give the deity to Sanatana Goswami. So Sanatana Goswami wakes up the next morning, he finds this deity outside of his hut there on Dwadasadicha Till, or the hill. He said, I have no facility for you, but you have to accept the deity because the man insisted, the deity insisted. And so he basically hung the deity from the tree. Because I mean, like you see sometimes the devotees will carry the deity around a little pouch or something like that. Do you see that sometimes? Actually, some ladies, I've seen quite often in India, you have ladies with a lot of gopal that are traveling around. You ever seen that? And even go to give a lot of gopal darshan of other deities. And then they go to other temples and they give a lot of gopal. It's quite interesting. So anyway, so Sanatana Goswami puts the deity in the tree, and what happens is that the deity started to complain after a while because all he was eating was dry chickpeas and dry bread balls that were cooked in the sun. And he said, "Can I have some salt?" And Sanatana Goswami said, "Look, I've been given this mission by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to establish the holy places, write books. I don't have time. If you want to get salt, you have to get it for yourself." Yes, the devotees sometimes have this intimate relationship with Krishna, which we can't imitate. And so later on, there was a boat with salt in it that got stuck in the middle of the river on the sandbar. And the owner of the Krishna Kapoor, he was very worried, and he saw this hill above the river. This hill was where Sanatana Goswami was. And so he walked up the hill and he saw Sanatana Goswami offered his Dandavad and said, "Swamiji, Baba, help me, help me." And Sanatana Goswami didn't want to get into it. He just talk to Madan Mohan here. Just talk to him and see if he wants to. So he goes to Madan Mohan, and practically immediately afterwards, this giant rainstorm. The boat is lifted up off the sandbar, and the gentleman had promised the deity that if this selling what I had in the boat, which is salt, is successful and I make a profit, you get the profit. And so he went to Mathura, sold all the salt, and took back the money and actually built the temple, Madan Mohan Temple, on Dwadasadicha Hill with that money. So in essence, we find that Madan Mohan actually made his own temple and got his own salt. Also, previously, Sanatana Goswami said to me, "Now you are asking for salt, because then you'll ask for butter. Your desires are unlimited." So just calm down. So that's quite an interesting story about the Madan Mohan temple. Of course, Madan Mohan is also the presiding deity of Sambandha Jnana, which is interesting. And the presiding deity of Abhideya, Rupa Goswami's deity, Radha Govinda, and the presiding deity, Gopinath, is the presiding deity of Prayojana. That's very easy to understand that because Madan Mohan means someone who attracts you from Cupid, right? Because all of us are attracted. We were talking about Cupid yesterday, not on Monday morning, but how Krishna is the transcendental Cupid. And so Krishna, what does Cupid do? Cupid has 5 arrows, right? The objects of the senses. And so Krishna also has 5 arrows. But these 5 arrows are the transcendental objects of the transcendental senses. So right now we're attracted by the objects of the mundane senses. And so we have to take shelter of Krishna. So Madan Mohan and Gopinath means basically Gopinath. I mean, not Gopinath, so Radha Govinda means to engage. Govinda means the proprietor of the senses or enjoyer of the senses. So to engage your senses in Krishna's service. And Gopinath means the Lord of the Gopis, which is Prayojana Thakur. So, anyway, so some other interesting stories about Sanatana Goswami. When Sanatana Goswami got old, he was actually 65, which is younger than me anyway. So he was having trouble circumambulating Govardhan Hill. So a young boy says to him, who is actually Krishna, you should not circumambulate Govardhan Hill anymore. It's too much for you. You're too old. And Sanatana Goswami says, no, I've taken this vow. I should not renounce my vows. And the young boy says to him, here's a Govardhan Shila. You just circumambulate this every day. And it's the same as Govardhan, which is true. In Sriram Mayapur, there's actually a replica of Govardhan at the Chaitanya Math, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's temple. And you can go around that. It only takes how about half a minute?
Yeah, at most.
You can do Dandavat Parikramas in 5 minutes. And there's replica of Radhakund and Chamakund there. So in that sense, Mayapur is much more merciful, Odaryadam. And Vrindavan is called Mathuryadam, the sweet place. Mayapur is known as the merciful place. Interesting, isn't it? That's why Gopinath stays in Mayapur. It means mercy. So, anyway, then Sanatana Goswami remained there for about 43 more years. It was very dear to the residents of Braj. And there's an interesting glorification by Bhakti Thakur in his Jaivatharma, which I have here. He says, Sanatana Goswami was empowered to explain the esoteric aspects of Krishna's manifest and unmanifest Braja Leelas. So his samadhi is right behind the Radha Madan Mohan temple in Vrindavan. And in Gorgana Dashtipika, Kavi Karnapur glorifies him as Rati Manjari and also Ravanga Manjari in Krishna's pastimes. And there's this statement here, Rupa Goswami's closest friend, who was known by the names of Rati Manjari and Ravanga Manjari, appeared in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Sri Sanatana Goswami, who is considered to be a personal extension of the body, this is Kavi Kanpur, a personal extension of the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Wow, pretty amazing glorification. So he wrote, basically his four most important books are the number one, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which has been translated in ISKCON by Gopal Pranadana Prabhu and his crew of Sanskrit experts, which details the story of Gopal Kumar. That's the second part. And the first part is detailing the story of Narada Muni looking for the best devotee of the Lord. And in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which is the first of all the books written by the Goswamis of Vrindavan, you'll find every aspect of Krishna consciousness. Sambandha Abhidaya Prayojana. If you understand this one book, you'll understand everything about Krishna consciousness. Most important book. And it's actually a beautiful story. Then you have the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is the rules and regulations for Vaishnavas, rituals and conduct of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Also, Srila Prabhupada commented that some of the injunctions in the Hari Bhakti Vilas are only applicable in India and not applicable in the Western world. They were actually meant to attract people who were into Brahminical, ritualistic Brahminical behavior of Krishna consciousness. So it's not that, there's injunctions in the Hari Bhakti Vilas that state you shouldn't eat carrots, but I think everybody eats carrots, right? There you go. But I like carrots. And so there's many injunctions, but we have to understand sometimes great Vaishnavas write something to attract people to Krishna consciousness. Like we have many rich preaching activities going on in Krishna consciousness, like we have Hatha Yoga being taught, brings people to Krishna consciousness. So we have to understand the time, place, and circumstance application of Krishna consciousness in order to be successful. One of the reasons in ISKCON, we're struggling in some places in the Western world, is that we're not adjusting our presentation. We keep the essence the same, the principles the same, but the details can actually be adjusted, some of the external details. Not going to get into that because it's controversial. So the next book was the Krishna Lila Stava. Beautiful book that has 432 verses and has pastimes from the Bhagavad Purana, elaboration on the pastimes, beginning with the 10th canto up to the killing of Kamsa. It's also referred to as the Dashama Charita. It's another book by Sanatana Goswami. And then one of the other books, which I refer to quite often, is called the Brihad Vaishnava Toshini, which is a commentary on the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, by Sanatana Goswami. It's also known as the Dashama. Typically, it's one of the commentaries that Srila Prabhupada would often consult when he was writing or commenting on the Bhagavatam. So that's Sanatana Goswami. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Maharaj, do you know about this Sanatana Goswami Shila? They're in at Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan.
Right.
But in Jaipur, where they have the original Radha Damodar deities,
Right.
they have also the Shila there, and they say that that is original, and that what is in Vrindavan, that is Pratipu. So do you know which one?
That's an interesting question. No. I don't know. For those of you who don't know, Pratibhu is like not only replica, it means a manifestation, another manifestation of the original, just to be more precise. Like in Vrindavan, you have the original temples of the Goswamis, like Sanatana Goswami's temple, Radha Madan Mohan. And also in Radhakund, you have all the Goswami temples too, which is interesting. And the reason for that, they're replica temples. The reason for that is when the Muslims attacked Vrindavan, they first moved the deities to Radhakund area. And then when the Muslims attacked there, then they moved the deities further away, like Jaipur, Udaipur, like Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Govinda, who's also in Jaipur. Madan Mohan lives in Karoli. Not Jaipur. So you have replicas of the temple. And after some time, they installed other deities in some of these temples, and these deities are called Pratibhu deities, which are manifestations or expansions or non-different from the original deities that were installed. So, thank you for your question. Any other questions? Yeah.
I found it quite interesting when you said that like Muslim city like Baghdad was an educational center.
Yeah.
But then I actually heard way in the past that Muslims they actually destroyed the libraries of esoteric knowledge with the idea that if it's in the Quran, we don't need it, and if it's not in the Quran, we don't want it. So could it have been the Mughals?
Those are the Mughals.
Yeah.
Those are the Mughals because the opposite information is actually true before the Mughals came in. During the European Dark Ages, you don't remember the Dark Ages?
Middle Ages.
Not that I do. So during the European, that's before we had airplanes or boats. Neanderthals. So during the Dark Ages, the works of the great Greek scholars, like Plato, Aristotle, were actually burnt and destroyed in the earth, not by the Muslims, but by the Europeans. And these works, I don't know if anyone else knows the history besides me, but these works were preserved by the Muslims in Baghdad. One of the reasons we still have these works is because they were preserved. So it's not, so it's important to understand it's not the religion we're dealing with has done all these things. It's some bad people. I mean, there have been some bad people in every religion. Like in the Christian Crusades, I mean, there were so many horrendous atrocities. The Christians would go to the Muslim villages and kill everybody in sight. So, And anyway, so many stories from the Dark Ages in Europe, I can tell you. Especially during the plague, people would attack other villages by throwing a body into the village that had the plague in it and infect everybody with the plague. So Baghdad was a seat of learning. There were Jewish people there were Christians there were Muslims there, and they were all exchanging philosophy. You know, they were talking philosophy. It was like a university city. So later on, the Mughals came and did what you mentioned. You know, so they were very educated Muslim scholars. I mean, of course, they were strict Muslims and they observed their rules and regulations. But in any religion or spiritual process, there's people who are going to be higher class and lower class. You know, so that's what happened when the Mongols came. You know, they destroyed Baghdad. They destroyed the universities. You know, Baghdad was just like a very sophisticated place. And so because of them, we now have the works of, not Socrates, Plato, because Plato actually was the one who wrote, and Socrates was his spiritual master. But that's another point. So we have the works of the Greek scholars. So many Greek scholars. Our whole European civilization is based upon Greek scholarship. Aristotle, Plotinus, so many people. So, yes, but later on, yes, they did that after the Mongols came in. So, I mean, we have nothing against Mongols, but that's the history. Genghis Khan. You will see that in the movies. So, anybody else have a question? Interesting history. We should be students of history. We should understand these things and research these things. I always have discussions with Sri Govinda about Indian history. Yes, the last time we were yelling at each other about Indian history. But anyway, interesting exchange and Indian politics. So devotees should be educated. So on that happy note, it's time for prasad. Right? All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jai, Goswami,
Jai.
His Holiness Krishna Das Goswami Maharaja ki.